Hi, I'm Sarah Wheeler's mom,
And I'm Miranda Rick's mom,
and this is the mother of it all,
where we take on culture through the lens of motherhood.
and motherhood through the lens of culture.
For Mother's Day this year, we wanted to do something a bit different. We think and talk a lot here about the current state of motherhood, of course, but we often have the nagging feeling that we're being a little too myopic. A friend observed to me recently that every few years or so, it's like women rediscover feminism and then repeat the mistakes of the feminists before them instead of improving upon their legacy. The same could be said for the motherhood discourse. Are we really the first generation of mothers to talk openly about how hard it is, to feel like social systems have abandoned us, to feel pressured to follow some kind of ideal? We don't think so. And at the same time, we're interested in what has changed, for better or worse, since the last iteration of the mother culture. So for this episode, we went straight to the source on a very personal level, to our moms. We want to hear what motherhood was like for them in the 80s and 90s and what they make of the current motherhood discourse. Beverly Reifman is a mother of 5 adult children and grandmother to 9. She was born in the great state of New Jersey and is now based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she's worked for decades as a psychotherapist. Linda Walton is a retired history professor and academic whose work focuses on ancient China and who was born in a small town in Ohio and has spent most of her adult life and of Miranda's in Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Beverly and Linda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're happy
Glad
to be here.
Yes.
So we usually start off by asking our guests who is caring for their kids right now. But your kids are grown up. And though you both care for grandkids often, and we know that even adult children can be quite dependent, we thought that since many of our listeners and as mothers of young children ourselves, we fantasize about when a lot of that kind of daily nitty gritty caring is done, how we'll care for ourselves. So we thought we'd ask you if you could tell us a small way you've cared for yourselves lately.
I thought about your question and I did a few things. I walked to Harvard, which is down the street from where I live, and listened to a free jazz concert and just sat in the back row and just felt part of this community and loved it. And then I just walked home, and that was wonderful. The other thing I did was I went to my art studio where I'd make quilts and clothing and costumes, and I cleaned it. And I realized that for me, self-care is making order. And it really, I had to struggle with, am I just cleaning because I'm supposed to clean? But I think truly I get a wonderful grounded feeling from cleaning up, getting ready for my next project. And that felt wonderful.
Mhm.
Thanks, Mom. And at 79, it feels like I love that you're still trying to tease apart, like me and Miranda are. Like, am I doing this because I've been acculturated or because it actually brings me joy? Oh, it's the latter. How about you, Linda?
Yeah. No, Bev, I really appreciate what you said about the cleaning because didn't jump to mind right away, but I think I share that very much. And it's interesting, kind of amazing how long it takes to get to a point, this is actually kind of a revelation. Oh, no, I do this because it's satisfying and rewarding to me, and I feel better when I feel I have some control over this space.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
yes.
So I appreciate having that perspective. But also I was going to say, not unlike you, I think the things I've done lately when I just jump to mind that are really self-care, I suppose you would say. Miranda knows this, I took, last year, I started taking Chinese landscape painting. I've never done anything artistic, and I really am not. I always think I haven't an artistic bone in my body, but I really enjoyed doing that. And I did a few things that I thought were okay. But then I had this, some yen to study calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy. And all of a sudden, a course popped up at the community college for the first time. And I'm taking it now, and I really enjoy it. It's just a pleasure. And these are things I haven't done before.
Yeah.
So it's new, and it's really genuinely for myself. And I like to think I can make things that might please others, but it's really for me.
Mom made beautiful bookmarks for Christmas, like beautiful painted bookmarks.
Wow.
And one of your paintings is on the fridge.
Oh, right.
And it
Fruits.
brings me joy every time.
But we do value your calligraphy, Linda, even if nobody sees it, right? It's like,
Yes, that's
it's like
part of this.
if a mother makes art and nobody gets, and nobody benefits from it, was it really worthwhile? Yes.
Yes, yes, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Just to back up what Linda said about having to go inside and really seeing what really feels like you're doing something that really is caring for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always a manicure or a yoga class. But everybody has a different idea about what gives you that sense of restoration and calm and connection with your own inner resources.
Bev and Linda, when you were mothers of young kids like Miranda and I, what was available? What were like the typical kind of self-care for mom activities? Were things like that available? I mean, people got manicures.
Boy, I never thought about it, to be perfectly honest. I think I was just too busy, but there must have been ways. I think my self-care, Miranda knows this, was our Friday night follies, as your father dubbed them. And Saturdays were our days together. And because I was a single mom, I was divorced from her dad, and we would just do fun things all day. So that was my self-care, I think, too. But truly going to a puppet show at the library, and then we'd go have lunch or
the Ladybug Theater.
Yes, and just hang out. And it was so fun. And so I enjoyed that. That was my fun time.
Wait, what were Friday night follies?
It was just, we would go to the video store, popcorn video.
Popcorn video, and then Trilogy.
Yes, and pick out a DVD.
VHS.
Or VHS, sorry. And then go home and have probably takeout or something and watch a movie. And that was just, it was the end of the week thing, a Friday night. And it's her dad who dubbed it the Friday Night Follies,
because he
was
would call sometimes, and he knew he couldn't keep me on the phone very long because we were busy.
Yeah, Princess Bride was on. Well, so and Linda, you were pretty much a full-time single parent, right? Correct? So yeah, I mean, the possibility of, slipping out to get a massage or do your calligraphy class at that time just really wasn't possible.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't absolutely full-time because she would go see her dad, one day of the weekend. And, we did, but that was often then I'd have to work to make up for the Saturday, right? Because it was, academic stuff, but I'm sure also, I mean, maybe a lot of other jobs maybe now are like that, but it was just, you never feel like you're done, right? But I think that's probably true of a lot of work now. And there's always something you should be doing.
Well, we have this fantasy, I think, of like work in the 80s and 90s that before email, you like didn't take it home. So I appreciate you being like, no, we took it home.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think of you, like my memory of you, and I don't know how recreational it was for you, but like after I would go to bed, I loved to listen to you on the phone with your friends.
Yeah.
Like I loved the sound of you on the phone with
that's nice to
Joni or Candace or whoever.
Yeah.
I don't know if that felt like replenishing.
That's a great point. That was a good source of sustenance. It was mutual, but it's nice to know that it was something positive to you, that you're absolutely right. I drew a lot from that. And I think that's why my friends have always been so important, because we go back to that. And
how about you, Mom, and self-care?
Well, I think talking to my friends and being with my friends and getting a cup of coffee or meeting in the park with a sandwich was very restorative. And for me, self-care was every once in a while, I would take one child and we'd stay at my office overnight.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Just one, we'd go to the movies on a Friday night and we'd get up and we'd go to that Greasy Spoon in Central Square at the diner and have breakfast. And then we'd go to the swimming pool and swim. That was our special, just one-on-one time. And that was
because
really,
there were 5 kids. It was like to be with one. I mean, be with one parent, it was a delight. Maybe an annual occurrence. But that's interesting
for
how everything's relative too. How it can be being with your children can, part of me wants to be like, that's not taking care of yourself. You're still like of service. But I do relate to the difference in quality, even with 2 kids, of like just kind of being with one of your kids and feeling your attention shift. And being able to kind of lean into the like deliciousness of the things that the commonalities that you have with like that specific kid, which it sounds like, Linda, you and Miranda just had a lot of the time, which is really sweet.
And it makes me hearing that, Bev, that you had 5 children. I mean, I know people do that, but it's just amazing to me. I just am in awe of you for that, because it's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah.
It's hard
for me to imagine.
Well, that's reassuring.
But somehow it happened.
What I tell people when they ask me, I say I got pregnant easily. I had babies easily, just 9 hours labor, easy, no complications. And I fall asleep really easily. So I can get up. That's total key. I can nurse a baby and go back to sleep, or someone has a nightmare and I go back to sleep. If that were not the case, I would not have had so many kids, because I just wouldn't have had the resilience. Yeah. But to be a good sleeper, watch out, all you good sleepers out there.
That's a wonderful point. I never thought about that, but I'm I'm historically a bad sleeper. And so, being actually Sarah and I were just talking about, we both had rough nights last night with children, and my kid woke me up at 5:40 and my alarm goes off at 7:30, so I should have had 2 more hours, but I didn't go back to sleep. And so
Mom, I think I got your like Russian Jewish facial features and body type, and Dad's insomnia. So
I think so.
What the fuck?
I think so too.
but it definitely made me stop at 2. I wanted to ask you both. We just recorded an episode of the podcast with an author named Lucy Jones, who was lovely, who wrote a book about matrescence, which is this idea that she did not come up with, but she explores really deeply about motherhood being, becoming a mother really being like a developmental stage. And this thing that happens on biological levels, psychological, social, cultural. I'm wondering if you think back to your own matrescences, what that was like for you, especially, in being children of the generations that you were raised in, to become a mother.
It's something I've thought about in broader terms, professional too, as I said, where I don't think it's just me. I think for a lot of people, things just happen. And I used to go to like career day at schools where you're supposed to talk about to the kids about how I became a whatever.
Yeah.
right? Or why I
Yeah.
did that. And it's like, well, I didn't have any plans. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 things happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 1,000 things, 1,000 little things.
Yeah.
And you kind of reacted, or you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it just, yeah. Anyway.
Linda, how do you, when you listen to the podcast, how do you feel like it's different for us?
The thing that strikes me the most, and it should be kind of obvious, I guess, to anybody who'd stop and think about it at all, is that your world is so kind of driven by, affected by the social media, obviously. I mean, this is so obvious. It probably is, just banal, but it hadn't really hit me so much that have so much coming at you about what it is to be a good mother, how you should parent. We had to actively seek it, I would say. I think Bev probably would share that. Like, you could read a book and talk to your friends about it, or, talk to your friends about parenting stuff, but it wasn't just constantly coming at you. So I felt like, I want to say I was flying by the seat of my pants, or just kind of, making it up as I went along, and just following it again, an instinctive love for my child. And I had wonderful parents. I had the great good fortune to have such wonderful parents, and a mother who was a nurse, and I think the most compassionate person I've ever known. And so I think they model that. And so that's a big part of it, right? What you come to from your own background.
Yeah, I'm kind of focusing on the word instincts that you just used.
Yeah.
What about you, Mom? Your matrescence and your how you see the difference between us, and you can be, as Linda said, be honest. Yes.
Yeah. This is a safe space.
So I want to acknowledge I'm only talking about my small cohort, and there are a lot of differences in our experiences. I think my mother's friends, as I knew them, I can't imagine that they ever talked about parenting. They were housewives. It was a very different focus. They wanted to be a good wife, and they wanted to have a family, but raise children. I don't think that that's how my mother and Sylvia and Rose thought about it. So I was part of the social expansive generation with the anti-racism movement, feminism, the anti-war movement. So I was born right after World War II and lived through Vietnam. So we were the generation that protested and said, we're not going to do things. We're not going to see the world the way you do. We saw ourselves as new thinkers and expanders of consciousness. So I think my cohort looked at motherhood in the same way. We wanted to be intentional parents. We wanted to be conscious about what we were doing. And there, as Linda said, there was not that much to read. Terry Brazelton, who helped you realize that every child was unique. That was really helpful. But we talked to each other, and out of
this right
Miranda's
here,
got the book right here.
Working and Caring.
He was a wonderful man. He lived near us. So we, out of women's consciousness raising groups, we learned not to be competitive with each other, but to be collaborative, and we were resources to each other. And we did that around our being mothers and getting through thinking about pregnancy and home births, because we didn't want to do it like our mothers did, and nursing, because we didn't want to do it like our mothers did, and helping each other, showing up. We did little play groups where we took all 4 kids one morning while the other one worked, and we were going to figure this out ourselves. And we really wanted to be conscious. We really wanted to think about how we were affecting our children and how each child was different. We even kind of would visit each other's home and watch the way they were handling a kid or handling a difficult observe.
Wow, observation sessions. That's amazing.
Right. And said, why don't you try it this way? It was quite wonderful. And it was quite this sense of we were experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
And even, tomorrow clothes, which is such a thing now, that came out of experimenting with me saying, oh my God, I have too many kids. I can't get them dressed in the morning. Okay, I'm going to bathe them the night before and put them in their sweatpants and
Oh.
t-shirts. And
Yeah, tomorrow clothes.
it came out of a real experience, a lived experience. And
Right, it wasn't like a suggestion on
right,
on a
right.
Instagram post.
And that's something I think about for your generation. And I mean, you're trying to create new ideas, but there's so many ideas out there, and you have to sort them out. And you still have to go back, as Linda said, into what's your intuition telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh, right, it was intuition, not instinct. That the word that you
right,
used.
yeah,
yeah.
But we
That's
had to. That was our main source of what was intuitive and
Yeah.
checking it out with friends. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not your main source, but it still is the source that you have to go to.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
like Sarah was talking about Lucy from our last episode, and Lucy Jones and her book Matrescence. And we were talking with her about, how do we she has this idea of matro reform, which is kind of like building on the idea of matricentric feminism and like taking maternal thought, sort of, which is inherently maybe communal, care driven, as sort of like the ultimate anti-patriarchy, right? And we were sort of talking about like, how do we get there? How do we get to this new also awareness of what matrescence is, how massive it is, how huge this transformation that we go through is, like a true metamorphosis.
Absolutely.
And how do we tap into that power, as opposed to the way society frames it now, which is like you diminish, in motherhood, or that's kind of the broad cultural narrative, and she mentioned consciousness raising groups, like you're talking about, like just getting together and talking about it. And I feel like I keep running into this idea, like you're sharing it, she shared it, and then this is very pop culture, but Palm Royale, which is the show that's on right now, which I'm enjoying. It's very delightful. Laura Dern, like in the show, heads up a consciousness raising group in the 70s. And I didn't really know about this as a way that I guess feminism was really being kind of disseminated. Does that seem fair?
I hadn't thought about it for a long time, but yes, as Bev was talking about, I thought, oh gosh, yes, that was a big thing in the 70s. And,
And Lucy said that our podcast is like maybe a modern version of that. And I was
that was
that's
a
so
great
cool.
compliment.
Yes.
That is.
And to, Bev, a lot of your friends also were therapists, right? And you're a therapist. My dad is a therapist. We were steeped in that too, what stands out to me most about what you're describing is how personal it is and how community driven it is. And, I think it's reductive to say that, online relationships and online information is not community building. It's a great tool for community building. And I think parents find real community in online forums and spaces. But what you're talking about is really just another level of also kind of this sustainable, real, point of interaction. I mean, the idea of going into other people's homes and observing is kind of mind-blowing to me. And it's funny because I always talk about it with teachers when I train teachers, that like the best thing you can do to develop your teaching practice is just to watch other teachers teach. And yet, we rarely get the
Yeah.
chance to watch other parents parent. And when we do, we usually have so much, I don't know, Miranda, if you would agree, like we have so much kind of noise going on in our heads about kind of analyzing their parenting and what we've already seen and whether they're following it and whether kind of they're being good or bad, that it's hard to just kind of watch with openness and kind of see what strikes you.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I think I'm thinking about the playground, and I do think that a lot of the parenting habits that I developed came probably from watching other families. In our old neighborhood, there were some families with kids that were older, to some degree older than mine. And kind of like I learned by watching them, and I also sometimes it was emulating, and sometimes it was like deciding to do something differently than what I saw. But yeah, I think when I watch peers, if they have a kid the same age as mine, I will sometimes be a little more like, it seems to spark more of a judgmental thing of kind of, well, that's not how I would do that, or whatever. But I think we talk a lot about schools, but like I think in our public neighborhood school that we love, like all of us parents, like we see each other at pickup and drop off like every day. And I think that kind of intimacy that builds up also helps to break down that knee-jerk judgment thing, because these people become your friends and you just know more about their lives, or you know more about maybe behaviors in their kids that they're struggling with. And so you kind of have that compassionate instinct or something where you're like, oh, they're probably really exasperated because that's like the 6th time I've seen that kid do that this week. Or because even like some of our boys, like hitting is a problem, like punching, kicking, we deal with a lot of physical stuff. And I think as a result, all of the mothers, and it is mostly mothers. There's one dad who's there a lot. Like I think we all kind of just there's an understanding between us that we're all just, and we deal with them in different ways. We do parent differently.
And that's respected. I mean, don't you think the judgment, though, is just an extension of self-judgment?
Definitely. And that's like the problem, right? It's we're hurting ourselves. Like I think that's what I've come to realize is like, if I'm judging another parent, that's a good moment if I can catch myself being like, what is this triggering in me about my own ways of being that I'm like disliking? Like, what am I upset with myself about? And like, it's not their deal. I don't know their life. And, but I think what you're saying about social media, I mean, I think there is community. But I'm thinking too about the harm that it can cause.
Well, I think that goes back to, we're raised in a capitalist country, which is predicated on competition. We need competition to succeed. And so being raised in that atmosphere, we learn to compete with each other, even as parents. Am I a better parent? Am I? And if we can get separate from that and really feel like we're all in this together, which Linda and I had the advantage of being part of the 60s, and that was such a push for women to feel we're not competing as mothers, we're helping each other. So what comes up is compassion. If you see someone struggling with a kid and feeling like there, but for the grace of God, go I. And we're in. So I don't know if Sarah, if you remember me walking you guys to the playground and one of you getting into a fight with the others, and it was
probably wasn't me. So
I
was more of a docile,
definitely
compliant,
just like you are now.
Definitely. And this old woman who was a history professor at Harvard, do you remember her on Fallon Street? She was walking down the street and she came over to me and said, "How can I help you?" because she saw I was so distressed.
Mm.
And I said, I said, you really want to help? She said, oh, yes, yes, I have so much compassion for you. And I said, will you take these kids to the playground while I talk to this child who obviously is
Ben,
having a hard time?
Ben, Becca, Alice.
Wow.
Yeah, no, yeah. Wow.
And that
It was
that
me.
was
It was
so
me, guys.
meaningful.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you feel, was that kind of typical? And Linda, did you feel like, where did judgment and competition come in for you? Both kind of how you put it out there and also how you felt it, reflected towards you as mothers. Was that the norm,
Yeah.
Mom?
It was something we were trying to build.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
You remember in our house, we kept trying to build that. We would notice there was a big house with 3 families, and we would notice who was stressed. And we would say, let me feed the kids tonight. You
Yeah.
go take a nap, or you go take a walk, or you go. Remember that? We would do
Yes.
that spontaneously.
Wow.
So I think we wanted to get that feeling that you are not in this alone.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it sounds wonderful. I can't, I'm struggling a little bit. I don't really identify, I guess, with um, I'm trying to think about the parenting in terms of feeling, competitive or not. I just, again, feel like everything was just kind of happening intuitively. I don't remember feeling any strong sense of criticism of other parents, or I don't know, maybe I was just trying to function and just get
Right.
by.
I
But
think so. Don't you think? I mean, you were so busy.
yeah, I
And we
guess.
had a lot, and then you had me and your job and your friends, and you had, I just, in my perception, it was like work.
Yeah, and that's how.
And
Thank you, because that's how I
come
feel.
home, cook dinner, like
Yeah.
put me to bed,
Yeah.
maybe have a glass
Good
of wine,
one.
watch Northern Exposure, and like go
Right.
to, and like
Right.
I feel like you were sort of maybe treading water a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and so I didn't see that or something, but I was thinking about Bev, when you were talking about that neighborhood, and just that's an extraordinary story about the history professor, because you think that's someone who might be totally checked out on stuff like parenting, right? Maybe
Right.
she had her own, but I do remember the JAMA group, that was something that came together in elementary school. It was 4 little girls, and we all needed after school care. And one of them
Maya's mom
hired a nanny, had a cis, large personality person and they went after school to this kind of basement space that one of the parents owned. And that was a great thing. That was, to me, a coming together of parents with a particular need and caring for our children, and it was a great thing. It
summers, we did summers.
Yeah, great bonding for everybody.
Well, Linda, I think, when I hear you talk about kind of puzzling over the fact that you felt like you didn't feel judgment from others or self-judgment, you weren't tracking that. I don't think, I don't think that's an accident. I think that, that probably has something to do with the shift in culture, that if you, if you wanted to kind of keep your head down and parent, it was, easier to do that. There are certainly, I know people now who kind of intentionally like tune everything out around parenting as much as they possibly can. But, it's almost like at this point saying that you could tune out messages about, body image. It's so pervasive. It takes a lot of work to shut off now. So I wonder if just easier to kind of just turn that valve. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I think there's much more judgment now on the internet that it's, bad and good, and this is how to raise a good child, and this is, I think it's so much more judgmental than when we raised kids. We just didn't have that kind of input.
Do either of you feel like, do you see things for your children parenting that you kind of wish that you'd had? Is there anything that feels like progress to you?
Oh.
Other than a podcast, you would have had a great,
Other than
you would
the
have had a
greatest
great podcast.
I know that Miranda's asked me before, and I kind of laugh about this. Like you would ask me, and this is sheer technology, it's nothing else, but where she would say, well, what did you do when you didn't have the monitor? To tell. And it's like, well, if you cried, I went to you, or if you didn't, I didn't. So it was like, but those sort of technological changes. But apart from that,
it's worse. Apart from that, it's worse. You would never want to parent now. Is that
no?
If you could put a monitor in a time machine back to the 80s, set, all good.
Yeah.
I think you've made progress from our, and I imagine you felt this way, Linda, our intention that men would do more childcare.
Yes.
And I think we had that intention, but I think we got as far as a situation where a man might say to you, tell me what to do, and be willing to do it. But I see in your generation that men are not the sous chef. They're not waiting to be told, that there are conversations about who's going to do what. And that means who's going to be thinking about this. And I think in our generation, even when a man was helpful, the women still had the thinking of who needs to go to the dentist, what's happening with this conflict in this classroom, what's going. I see in your generation, you have more confidence that a marriage contract can be rewritten than we did. And I think that's why I think we were the generation of divorce. And I think that was our way of saying we have agency. We're not staying in something that isn't good, isn't healthy. We're getting out. And we did it. But you're saying, I'm unhappy. I don't like the way things are. This isn't meeting my needs. And we can renegotiate this. And the culture is saying you should renegotiate, that marriages change. Our culture was saying you should get out. Even if you go to couples therapy, we didn't have the support that your generation gives to redefine, renegotiate. This isn't working. Here are the creative moves you can make. You don't have to get divorced to stay alive and stay healthy. And I think you're doing better than we did.
I wanted to ask you both actually about romantic relationships. You both had children with your second husbands. Linda, you've been partnered for, I think, over a decade. And Mom, you've been with my stepfather, Paul, for 25 years. What can you tell us about love and partnership throughout the lifespan?
Wow.
You're just like nothing.
Just in like 1 minute.
5 minutes.
Next question.
What are you willing to tell us?
Yeah, no pressure.
You got to have your secrets.
Yeah,
having been a single parent for a long time, and I did a little bit of dating, not much, but it was hard. Even once we had our nanny from Taiwan living with us, it was a lot easier. But I don't know. Again, part of it was being busy, but I don't know if I was not good at it. I mean, not good at connecting with men. But, I was sorry that there wasn't something else that I could, someone to have as a partner then. But obviously I wasn't unhappy either. So It's still kind of a mystery to me, I have to say. Um, yeah, I don't know if I still like, I kind of grew up in this era of thinking that there is one person. I know, like there's one, not a soulmate, but one person is the right person. And I doubt if many people think that anymore. And I loved what Bev said about the changes in your generation. That is so true and so important. The ability to renegotiate or to see marriage as much more of a partnership and getting away from that, what Bev said, absolutely, that whether someone does something or not, you're always the one who has to remember how everything, what needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not that helpful to have somebody just do something because you tell them to, right? Because you carry that kind of emotional and psychological burden of, oh, I'm in charge of everything. And so,
Right. Right.
yeah, I don't have any great comments about romance. I wish I did.
Well, it sounds like, Linda,
Yeah.
you're saying maybe that that it's a little, romantic partnership can be a little bit easier. At least it was for you and your generation when you weren't doing all of that negotiation around children. Maybe
Yes.
that's something you get to have in this current relationship you're in, is not having to
Negotiate about children.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good point. Yes, this
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
I think my mom's parents were kind of rare birds because they, in like on paper, you could look at their marriage and two kids and all of this as very textbook for their time, don't you think? But I think Grandma and Grandpa really loved each other
I do too.
for their whole lives,
Mhm.
and were just very kind, warm, loving people who loved each other and loved their children. And I think of them as your foundation, and I kind of think of them as maybe part of why you were insulated from feelings of judgment in your parenthood too, because you had them. I mean, Grandma and Grandpa sort of cheered you on.
Yes,
always,
they did.
right?
They lived far away, but we saw them once or twice a year, and
Yeah.
I talked to them every week and felt close. Yeah, and I always had them in my mind though too, as
Right.
I used to feel guilty that, well, why can't I do that? That I somehow failed. Not that they made me feel that way, but I felt myself, they have this wonderful marriage and genuine love. I completely agree. And so why can't I do that?
They made it look easy. And I think that's kind of, it's not a lie like in a bad way, but it's not easy, and it's not something everyone just stumbles into.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
so
I think
interesting how deeply we're affected by just the immediate relationships around us, even with, right, how the culture's shifting, and like you said, Mom, about, what's acceptable around a marriage. But really, you're still just like always looking to your parents for guidance.
Yeah.
Did you add anything, Mom?
Trying to pare down what I want to say because the things that have been said sort of stir me on different directions.
That's what's so hard about this.
Yeah.
That's why I interrupt so much.
Yeah. Romantic love changes as your life gets less complicated. So if you're, having kids, there's so much to negotiate, and the power balance is so hard to get to an acceptable level that's a real point of contention. And I think that's when a lot of marriages end. I'd rather be on my own dealing with this and fighting with you all the time about what I think is fair. So when your life gets less complicated, it's easier to just focus on being good companions and responding to each other's needs. There's just two of you. And then an extended family, but just two of you living in the home. It's easier. And you learn to make room for differences instead of talking your partner out of their differences. You have confidence that you can do that, that you can expand to include um, what pleases people or what takes care of their needs. You're not fighting about whether to take a winter vacation or a Caribbean vacation. You kind of take turns. You know how to do that creatively. Um, when you get older, you put more emphasis on creative negotiation and inclusion than power because you're not fighting for power the way you do when you're younger.
Yeah, there's this thing, I talk about with my husband John a lot, which is like that it's just really hard sometimes to get out of the idea that like we have a inverse correlation, that our needs have that relationship where like if one of us takes more, the other one gets less, and vice
Yeah,
versa. And resources are scarce. And even when I think acknowledging that is helpful.
yeah,
You would probably say as a therapist mom, that's the first step. And
yeah.
and it's just sometimes like we just find ourselves stuck in it being really shitty, and there's not much to do.
I feel like this is my divorce, like, not that I'm going to divorce David, but like when things are really hard and I'm like really frustrated with him, and I know that it's like maybe not 100% fair, like he's also doing his best, but everything is just hard. And it's easier to be mad at him than it is to be mad at the kids. And sometimes I'll do this little thing in my mind where it's like the divorce gut check, and it's like, is this still the person though that like when my kids go away to college, I'm going to be so excited to get on a plane with him and go to Maui and sit on the beach next to him and have Mai Tai and talk about how much we love our kids and talk
You
about
won't
our
be able
life.
to afford it. Sorry, just
I know.
because college is going to be like $200,000.
All
But go
my
on with the
fantasies involve Hawaii. So just deal with it. But like that's my gut check. It's like, is
local
this
bar.
still the guy that I want to go sit,
Yeah.
and have a margarita with, and and that's I guess the purpose of like date night, as kind of annoying as that phrase can be. It's like when we do go out and we have some time and we kind of take this little blip out of life and we go and we sit across from each other. And I think I told you about this, like maybe we on a recent night we like to go read at this one bar that's like our little favorite date night thing to do. And
You read, like you each have a book?
we each have our book and we read next to each other. And like David was like, so tell me about your book. Like, what's your book about? And I was like, oh, I do love you. I do. Like, I do want to tell you about my book. And then I had him tell me about his book. And like, it was just, and he kind of said, let's not talk about the kids. Okay. And I was like, great idea. Great plan.
Yeah.
And like, but it's like, that's not the day to day. That's like 1 hour out of like a month.
But an hour can last you a month.
Yeah.
A good hour can last you a month. Yeah, it's so beautiful, Miranda, sharing about your grandparents, and I think that does sound really special. And I think I won't speak for your experience, Mom, but I don't think that's quite. I don't, it's complicated, but I don't think that's the marriage that you were growing up in. And your marriage to my dad had a lot of great things about it from my vantage point, us for sure. And I love you both. And, it wasn't, from a kid's perspective, a model marriage, right? It was hard in a lot of ways. But your marriage to Paul, my stepfather, has been, that's really, you've been together since I was a kid. And then that became kind of my model for a loving partnership, a loving romantic partnership. And I guess I just want to like admire the persistence of that. I know you're giving our generation kind of this credit for being flexible around marriage, but to also kind of reinvent how you want to be in a relationship, moving from relationship to relationship is impressive. And I think it's true for my dad too, that he's now married to someone where they have a beautiful relationship. And it's just, I think it's very cool to see that and to have people, we know it's not the, the couple, the dyad is not the be all end all, but to see people continue to experiment with that.
Yeah,
That's true. And that goes back to, I think, feminism and the belief that women have the right to be happy and to pursue happiness when they feel they can't make it in one place, to feel they can make it in another place, and that they'll have the support from their friends and family and community to do that. And I don't think my mother had that.
Yeah.
And I think my parents were devoted to each other, but my mother was not happy, and
it didn't seem like happiness was on the table. Yeah.
And I think part of why she wasn't happy was I think she was living out a lot of shoulds, and I think she would have been much happier working. And she couldn't work. My father didn't want her to work. I think she was a really repressed person, and I think it. Part of it was my dad, but most of it was the culture. And it was just a wrong, a life that didn't quite meet who she was. And I don't think she ever articulated that. She just experienced it by being depressed.
Yeah.
And that was hard as a kid to understand what was going on with her. I spent a lot of time trying to cheer her up and find things that would make her happy. She would have been happy
little bit
working in the world. With other women. She loved being with women. I could see her working in a factory with women, and she didn't. Yeah, this nuclear marriage thing to a big personality man was not good for her.
Well, I loved your word that you used in a slightly different context, but the word expansiveness, like, Sarah and I spent a lot of time complaining about what is harmful.
Full stop.
In the culture, complaining, but especially about what is harmful in the culture of modern motherhood. And I think those critiques are valid and important. And, but it's very, also helpful to stop and remember, like, we've gained a lot in a relatively short amount of time. And how, that gives me hope. In a post-Roe America, I worry a lot about my daughter's safety and feel very frustrated.
Meant a different thing for their generation post-Roe. We're using it, post-overturn. Jeez.
Oh, Lordy.
That was a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Moment of silence for that. But, I think, I know Sarah and I both were really moved by the movie Women Talking. And, at the end of it, when, spoiler alert, like it's all about what you're giving, not to your children, but maybe your grandchildren, or what you hope for your grandchildren's children. And thinking about, I hope, like, the stuff that Sarah and I talk about and the wonderful people who we get to interview who are writing these books and thinking about this and engaging deeply, where will we be in another generation or two? And these stories, it's a sad story about your mother, and it's painful to hear. And then it also makes me feel hopeful that was so different for you and then for Sarah. And I hope
we keep building on the legacy of the past.
Well, I was just thinking what Bev had said about your mother, that you just makes me grieve anew for the loss for so many people. And I'm sure it was true of a lot of people. And I'm thinking about my own mother's work, that she had a profession that she was very proud of. And she was so proud that she graduated from Ohio State in nursing in 1944.
Wow.
And and she grew up, her father was a sharecropper to start with, and grew up on a rural farm in Ohio, and but did this. And she wasn't working when she had her children, but she did go back to work part-time when we were growing up. And then after we left home, and she worked as an industrial nurse in a big GM factory near Detroit. So I've always thought of that as kind of extraordinary for her generation. And I wonder, in retrospect, if she might have been more like your mother if she hadn't had that opportunity that, and I don't know why and how.
We were talking about this recently. I asked my mom has my grandmother's nursing school graduation picture.
Like the whole group of them. Yeah.
In her bedroom. And I was saying, I wonder what moved Grandma Becky or empowered her to go do this kind of odd thing in that moment, in that time, in that place. And also that it didn't threaten Grandpa Jim.
No,
but Grandpa Jim's mother was kind of a force.
Yes, she was.
Right?
She was.
And so,
she worked. Yes.
Right. And so that maybe also comes from her, raising a son maybe who didn't feel the need to be like, well, my wife won't work, And so but it's kind of like we said at the beginning, it's a storm of things. It's like this, there's not one thing. It's
and kind of unpredictable
things. Yeah.
Configuration. Yeah.
Well, I have a final question for both of you. I think as we're talking about the legacy of our mothers, you're now decades into parenthood, and some of the advice I got, as I know Miranda's going to be 40 tomorrow. It's amazing. Some of the advice I got when I was becoming a mother was to kind of just to know that like the love I had for my children would never be returned in the same way at that volume, and that I would I would never really be like recognized for what I'd done, and that was just kind of part of the agreement. I wonder if you agree with that, or at this point in your motherhood, if you feel like you've been seen for all you've done.
Yes, I do. I do. I do.
You don't have to say it.
No, I do. I honestly do. That's a great question, and it's good to hear it and think about it. And I do it. I don't even question it. I feel extraordinarily lucky that I have a daughter, who I can see often and whose children I can see often, but who's happy and successful. And I often have told her how much I admire the way she has lived her professional life, because she's done a lot of different things and done them really well. And I kind of feel like I've done this sort of, once I figured out what I was doing, I've done the same thing most of my life, but that's okay too. But I really admire that. And I just feel grateful mostly, I think. Yeah, I do. I do.
Do you feel like the culture's seen you? The outside world?
Yeah. You mean as a mother or just in general? Yes, I do. I actually do. Yeah. At least at this point, and if I can just go back to something Bev said, but this is earlier, but I think it still is relevant to this other question, that the, your partner, husband, whatever, spouse, it took me a long time to get to the point where, and it's probably not having children as a concern also, but just that person doesn't have to be the end all and be all of everything to me, because I am on my own fine, and I'm a world of my own, and it's great to have this partner and companion and to share things with, but I don't depend on that for my sense of self. And I think that's a hard thing to come to, at least for me. And maybe it's a little bit better now. And I'm so grateful that Miranda has a partner who I think the world of. And I think I wish everybody had someone like that. Really, I do. I do.
He's pretty good.
But that's good luck.
It is. It's dumb luck. I mean, I do think it's a lot of luck, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
What about you, Mom? What does that bring up for you?
Yeah. Uh, uh, the deepest, most important reward for me and reflection on my motherhood is how, as you said, how my children are living, and
Mhm.
I am so deeply proud of them, and so moved by how they live their lives with such integrity and care for the world and care for others and care for each other. My kids really love each other and they're really a support to each other. And that's what I wanted. It's what I craved. And that is the biggest flower, um, the biggest bouquet. Um, and I see if I can find words for this. My love for my children is a love of a mother to a child. And my kids are now living their lives, and their love for me is still there, but it's different. And I still have, when we were talking back then about what mothering really was, one of the things we get to do is to experience what it's like to love this being. And it is extraordinary. And we know something as mothers that is so profound, that we grow these babies and we deliver these babies and we see this and we are so in love, right? In
Mhm.
love in a way I don't think we're in love with anyone else. We
That's
and then when they go away and you're so happy, they go away and live their lives. Their lives are full. They find a place for themselves in the world that really fits them. They find partners. You're just so happy. They have amazing grandchildren. But your love as a mother is not matched and can't be matched. And maybe
Yeah.
that's what that person meant, Sarah, when they said it will never be
Mm-hmm.
rewarded or something. It will never, it stops being matched for what you hold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make
Linda's
sense?
nodding.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
really see that because when Miranda had her first child, Griffin, you realize, my relationship with her will never be the same.
Yeah.
And because she has this other creature that she loves with her whole heart, I'm gonna tear up here, but I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's a good
Right.
thing. It's just what is supposed to happen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you
Right.
love him with,
Yes, I do.
which I found
do.
so
Yeah.
much.
Mom, you're an internal family systems therapist, and I'm thinking about a tool that they and you use, talking about how you can have multiple parts
Right.
that exist at the same time. And I almost, when I hear you talk, I'm thinking about there's a part of a mother, even at basically 80,
80.
who still still wants to, like, dress the wounds, and and snuggle you in the middle of the night. And I think about the way that
Yeah.
my son kind of seems like he would like to, like, return to my body often. Like, he can't get intimate
Close enough.
to the point where I'm like, that yeah, consent. And that like, you never get over a part of you never gets over the loss of that. Does that ring true?
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
You can have the part, as Linda said, that this is how it should be and you want it that way, and I'm glad and happy, and the yearning. Yeah, that yearning doesn't for your
Yeah, it's
for
been
that being does not go away. It sits next to the other parts. Yeah.
Mhm.
I was finishing Lydia Kiesling's The Golden State last night.
So
And
good.
so good. And I was
Such-
reading, I read like 5 times this little passage about the main character remembering her mother telling her that she saw in her face every age she had ever been. And I think about that so often with my kids, where,
Yeah.
you know, when, well, I told Griffin the other night, I was tucking him in and laying with him in bed, and I said that when he lays on my chest, it reminds me always of the first night in the hospital with him sleeping on my chest.
Mhm.
And like I hold his head, and I think of the way that I used to put my hand on what I knew was his head in my stomach, you know. And it's like now it's been 6 years, 6.5 years, and I'm like, I guess this is never gonna stop. Like, is he
Yeah.
gonna be 40 sitting next to me, and I'll put
No.
my hand on his head and go, thinking about what it felt like on my stomach. And
No.
what you say, I mean, this is what mothers carry,
Yeah.
and they don't, and it's not, he doesn't remember. I mean, in that moment when I was telling him about this in bed, he said, yeah, I remember that night, Mom. I said, okay.
He
You know,
really?
yeah, of course he did. And but
Yeah.
it's something I will carry, and he isn't supposed to. And it's his because he was there, but it's mostly mine. And
Yeah.
there's sort of a, like, this very tender, like, beauty and a little bit of ache, you know,
Well,
and I guess that's just inevitable.
Well, this calls up a memory that when I was close to 40, your dad and I were living in our house, and my parents were visiting, and we'd gone out for a run, and we came back, and I was sitting on the floor next to the sofa, and my mother reached over and put her hand on the top of my head, and she said, "That sweet head." And I mean, it makes me think of that, you know, that was like such a moment of kind of maternal remembrance or something, you know, because I was like 40 almost, you know, so, right.
That sweet head.
Mm.
Well, before we let you go,
Mhm.
well, I want to try something. At the top, we, introduced you both, Bev and Linda, and I'm going to attempt another introduction that maybe helps you kind of see how the work of your mothering does continue on. Beverly Reifman is the best listener, oh, I'm going to cry, I have ever met. She never gives up on a stain, or for that matter, a person. She sees the good in everyone and is a model for deep, fulfilling relationships that can weather hard moments. She somehow managed to raise 5 children who are not only not sociopaths, but truly lovely human beings, and to have an impressive career supporting hundreds, maybe thousands of people through life's tricky parts. She never stops learning new things, meeting new people, trying to improve things for others. She has passed on a legacy of generosity, interconnectedness, and service to her children and grandchildren, whose love and appreciation for her cannot really be put into words.
Oh, Sarah. Oh, my heart is quelling. That's so sweet. Thank
That's
you so
beautiful.
much.
Yeah.
I will hold on to every syllable.
So
Love you.
Love you too, Mom.
I am underprepared, so I have to wing it. But I know you really well, so I think I can. Linda Walton is the best friend anyone could ask for. I think she's sort of famous in her circles for being a diehard good friend. She'll make chicken soup if you're sick. She'll bring you, she flew across the country when David got sick on a whim. She's always there for you, day, night, whenever. And she's a hard worker. She's dedicated. She's sort of unbelievably compassionate and empathetic. And she inspires me all the time with just who she is. And I love you so much.
Thank you.
Oh.
Right back at you.
Yeah. You're one of my top 3 favorite people.
That's good enough. That's good enough.
We're so grateful to the both of you for being here and for all you've done for us and continue to do, even though we're old.
Thank you.
We love you.
This was fun.
Thank you. This was so
And we'll
fun.
always be
Pleasure.
older.
Thanks for listening to The Mother of It All. And like my mom always said,
Happy Mother's Day.
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Knox Media with music from It's Electric. You can follow us on Substack at motherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox, chat and comment features, episode transcripts, and more. And on Instagram at The Mother of It All. We know you are profoundly busy, but if you like listening and can manage to follow, rate, or review us in a small moment between leaning in and having it all, it will help us reach a wider audience and meet our stretch goal of getting Michelle Obama on the pod. Thanks for your support. Now get out there and have a totally passable day.